Hello, I'm Justice Jennifer Brunner of the Ohio Supreme Court and candidate for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in 2022. And I'm so pleased to have with me today in our Achieving Justice series, Judge Alison Breaux from the Common Pleas Court of Summit County General Division. Welcome, Judge Breaux.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
You have been on the bench for 6 years so far, correct?
Yes, just under 6 years.
And then you're facing a reelection this November. Is that right?
Correct. My
Yes.
first reelection.
Yes. So, well, 6 years goes fast, doesn't it?
It really does. And I know that, other elected officials have 2 and 4 year terms. So I know that we should never complain as judges because we do get the longest terms, but it does go by really, really fast.
It certainly does. Once you get through that first year and you get the hang of a docket, you just can't believe how the months fly. And there's so much work.
There's a lot of work. Yes.
Yes.
Keeps you busy.
It does. And on top of the work that you do on your regular docket, you decided to start a mental health court for felony offenses. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I took the bench in early 2017 and quickly noticed that the intersection of criminal justice and mental health was very, very prominent. I saw a lot of individuals who were touched by mental illness, who had been arrested and spent a lot of time in jail, a lot of time in hospitals, et cetera. I had a particular case that really, really touched my heart about an individual who was in his 60s who had been living very, very stably for many, many years with schizophrenia, but due to some family and life circumstances, no longer had some support that he had previously had. And over a relatively short amount of time, he found himself involved and charged with a very serious offense. So when I saw him in court, he was visibly very, very ill. I wanted him to get competent. He wasn't competent at the time, so I wanted him to find some competency. So he was actually housed at North Coast Behavioral Health for a period of time. And he came back to us once he had his competency restored. And at that time, I wanted to start negotiations with the prosecutor and the defense attorney at the time. And I told them I thought that with the right supervision and with the right access to resources, that I thought that he could do really well, just as he had in the past. And so kind of took a chance on him. There was no mental health court at the time. So we kind of used that to sort of say, okay, is this doable? With the right resources, can we do this? And simultaneously, I was meeting with a lot of agencies in Summit County that did provide access to treatment and resources for those with mental illnesses, and asked them, hey, is this something that you think that our county needs? Everyone jumped out of their seats and said, yes, please. So all of those things kind of happened in that first year of 2017 to early 2018. And then we started the court in 2018. And I am going to report that the gentleman who was sort of the inspiration to the court is doing fabulous. He graduated successfully from community controller probation. He's doing wonderful. He actually comes every Tuesday to our court and offers, bits of wisdom and encouragement to our participants. So he doesn't have an active role, but he always shows up and he's like our inspiration. So it's a real great success story that we're really proud of.
That's a wonderful success story. I have some familiarity. I remember when I was a trial judge in Franklin County, I was inspired by Judge Eleanor Stormer, who started the first mental health court in the state of Ohio in the municipal court when she was a municipal court judge. And I thought this would be a fantastic, at least a approach to the problem of recidivism and seeing folks come, through in and out that door. And, I learned from some of my training the differences between mental health and substance abuse in the approach, but I also knew that there's this intersection between the two. I think you mentioned to me in some discussion we had earlier that about 93% of the folks in your court also have a substance abuse problem.
Yeah, that's true. And the number's always changing, but it's really, really high number. Between 85 and 95% of our participants have a co-occurring substance use disorder. So for many, many years, they have utilized substances to cope with their mental illness. And so it is something that we really have to be very, very top of mind when putting services in place for them, that they, it's not, you can't fix one before you fix the other. In my opinion, you really need to fix them both at the same time and have a holistic approach to the substance use as well as to the mental illness. So it is one of the issues that we really do deal with in Summit County in our mental health court. And just wanted to say that Judge Stormer was a pioneer in Summit County on many levels, not just in mental health, but also with her drug court. And she now runs the new day court in Summit County through civil commitment cases. And she's doing fantastic work there. So she has carried the torch for many of us who are interested in mental health and criminal justice.
Oh, wow. I have no doubt. It was inspiring when I saw what she was doing. What do you think the next 6 years looks like, assuming that you get through this election?
We'll certainly want to continue the work that I'm doing on the mental health court bench that we call HOPE. It's our HOPE court. It stands for Healing, Opportunity, Progress, and Empowerment. So, we're still in our infancy with that because we did just start in 2018. So far, we have 16 graduates from the program. Pardon me.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a 2-year program. So, and we had a pandemic, if everybody knows. So to have that many folks graduate from our program just in the last 3 or 4 years, we're really, really proud of that work. So I want to continue with that. I'm a big proponent of access to justice, equality, and I try to use that as the fabric of all of the things that I do with my criminal cases as well as my civil cases, but also just with the public that comes through our court, even for the jury services. So right now I'm serving as presiding judge, and I've been presiding judge since the beginning of 2021. So in that role, I oversee all of our jury proceedings. So we've tried to implement better procedures so that we can make it easier to serve, make it easier to get the information for folks who are being summoned to court to serve on the jury. And so we're trying to do a lot of that, bring it back into the 21st century. So I would like to continue all of that work.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, you had a life before you were on the bench. Tell us a little bit about your background.
I don't remember that. I do. So I grew up all over. My mom is a nurse and my dad is an engineer, and he worked for General Electric, and we were very, very transient. So I went to, I think, 7 or 8 schools before I started high school. That's in different states. We even lived overseas in Japan for a couple of years. So I kind of grew up as the new kid throughout my life, and then landed in Ohio in Summit County just before high school, finished out high school. And then I was determined to go elsewhere because, I just had that transient blood in me. So I did go away to Texas for my first year of college. But I have to tell you, the Midwest, somehow it settled in me. And so I had to come back. I just realized that my roots were a little more Midwestern. So came back, attended Kent State University, where I graduated from, and then I went to University of Akron for law school and have been here ever since. Got married in 2000. My husband and I live in Akron with our 3 children, who are all teenagers.
Oh, you are busy.
Well, yes.
Yeah. So but what a great perspective, being able to live in another country for even 2 years. And Japan is fascinating to me. So you were, how old were you when you were?
I was very young when we lived there. I think I was like 7 years old when we had moved. But we did go back in 2016, and it was great to go back as an adult and also bring my children and have that exposure. My dad is 100% Japanese, so that is my heritage. So it was great. It was a wonderful trip. Put it on everybody's bucket list. If you haven't been over to Asia, definitely try to get to Japan. It's just a fascinating country.
Oh, absolutely. You've got one getting ready to go on to college, and then 2 one that'll be going into high school, and 1 more in high school. We have in the Supreme Court, we have a judicial family network. And, I can remember I had a teenage son that at one point said to me, Mom, you might be a judge, but you're not the boss of everybody. And I looked at him and said, yeah, but I'm the boss of you.
You're right. Most importantly.
Yes. So I think somebody not in the court system and not knowing a judge, how does that work with your kids? Does it make any difference?
No, doesn't make a difference at all. No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think that I'm just mom to them. It doesn't matter. I've had them at work. I've brought them to work, and bringing them to community events and try to get them sort of exposed to what I do. But I think the thrill is lost on them. They're just, they're teenagers who think mom's not the coolest person in the room, but she does, when she says something, we need to do what she says, and we need to follow through with what we tell her we're going to do. And we understand that sometimes things come with a lecture, but I'm just mom to them.
That's great. Well, so for people who don't understand, can you explain what a presiding judge is?
Well, it's different every county, but what we do in Summit County, we have a presiding judge, we have an administrative judge. Our administrative judge is kind of she's the one who oversees all of our administrative work, as you can see from the title. So dealing with all of our county issues, dealing with HR, all of those things fall on the administrative judge. Presiding judge in Summit County, what we do is we oversee the jury process, grand jury and petit jury. Our grand jury service is every 2 months, and we summons about 65 people every 2 months to come and serve for that 60-day period. And we conduct interviews and just to determine who are the best candidates to serve on that grand jury pool, because it is, it's a huge endeavor. It's a huge sacrifice. So we try to take our time interviewing individuals and making sure that the process is really, really respected as far as integrity, et cetera. And then the petit jury is kind of common to what everybody knows as jury service. So when you come in and you are selected to serve to determine the outcome of a case, in a criminal case, whether or not an individual is to be found guilty or not guilty, in a civil trial, whether or not there's liability or not, and then also if there are damages, what is that number going to be? So most people are familiar with that because they watch the crime shows and Law and Order, and it's all about the jury. So just making sure that we have a good process in place. We had to be really mindful about the COVID procedures and restrictions, making sure that we were kept apprised of what the numbers were so that we could be cognizant of people's, their level of comfort coming into the courthouse, making sure that we were putting in place good safety measures so that people were comfortable staying there. It's not your choice to go to court if you're being summoned to be a juror. It's not like going to the grocery store where some people say, well, I'm going to wear a mask and feel comfortable. A lot of folks weren't comfortable leaving their houses, and then more so being around other people, being in enclosed areas, et cetera. So those are things we just had to make sure that we were being mindful of throughout the time that we served, that I've been serving on as a presiding judge.
And so is it a 2-year term for presiding?
It's a 1-year term, and it's by appointment, it's by a vote, but by the bench.
And the same goes for administrative judge too.
And the same is true for administrative judge.
So it seems like everybody gets a turn who wants one.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great.
It's an added layer of work because I also, as part of presiding judge, I do review all of the indictments. So, our grand jury meets every day. So grand jury is meeting, they're signing the indictments. I have to make sure that those are all accurate, make sure they get filed appropriately. If there's any issues that arise between with a particular juror, with a particular case, do we need a special prosecutor? All of those things do fall on the presiding judge.
Yeah, and so for people to understand indictment, it's essentially the criminal complaint against the person. Well, maybe you can explain it better for folks.
So it's the formal charge. So if an individual gets arrested, between the arrest date and their indictment, that case would be going to grand jury. The grand jury would make that determination whether there was enough evidence to actually indict the individual. If they do, then the indictment gets filed and then they appear for an arraignment. So the indictment is the formal charge. So you may be arrested for something, but you are indicted for something else. Sometimes it's the same thing. Sometimes it can be more, it can be less, just depending on how the evidence falls out during that grand jury proceeding.
So a quick question back to COVID. First of all, how easy was it to conduct a trial during COVID, especially with juries?
So we at Summit County, the courthouse was open. If folks wanted to have trials, we would allow that to happen, understanding that there were certain parameters that needed to be met, certain procedures that needed to be met, and also approval from the administrative judge. So during that time, I don't think many did go forward. But since I would say probably about 9, maybe even it's been about a year, more jury trials have been going forward. We utilized all we implemented plexiglass in all of our jury boxes throughout the courtroom. Some of those have been removed since then, but we put up all of that safety stuff. So, and we had masks available, and there were requirements that everybody had to wear a mask. And to be fair, some of the parties just weren't comfortable having a trial with masks on, not being able to see the jury's faces. So for those, I think we were all very liberal about joint continuances that were, when the parties agreed that they didn't want to go forward, I think that everybody was pretty liberal about granting those continuances. It's created a bit of a backlog, but
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think everyone certainly across Ohio is experiencing that. And we are in Summit County too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough because criminal cases have a time deadline, especially if the person's in jail.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that works for you, but it seems like the civil cases get delayed a little bit longer because of the speedy trial requirements on the criminal.
They do. And I know that's really frustrating for the civil bar, but when we're talking about somebody's freedom, we do have those cases, and those constitutional rights do take precedence. So I know that's frustrating to hear. I did civil practice, and I remember that happening. But it's sort of the nature of how Summit County is set up, in that each judge does have a civil docket and a criminal docket.
Oh, it was the same in Franklin County. I think it's the same many places. I once had a judge on my court offer to swap me. He'd take all my criminal and I could have all of his civil. And I said, no, I like them both.
And I do like them both. I really enjoy the civil work. It's very challenging. So I like all of it. I really do. Now, yeah. I do, I know that there are some counties do have specialized courts, for instance, I'm drawing a blank, but specialized like civil.
Right. Business dockets.
That something kind of like that. Yeah. So yeah, I understand all of that though.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's highs and lows to, or advantages and disadvantages to the civil dockets. Sometimes the subject matter is very specialized, and one judge gets used to handling that, and there's a lot less explanation or learning curve. But then on the other hand, people may like the variety of different judges having the case and not just one particular judge. So they've worked in some places, other places they've decided not to continue with them. Yeah. Well, as the year moves forward, I'm excited for people to get to know who you are. Is there anything that you think that I could have covered today or should cover, or anything special you'd want people to know about Judge Breaux?
Judge Breaux wants people to vote. I think it's really, really important for everyone to vote, to have that right. And so I know that when I do go and talk to groups in the community, I always ask, what are the top 5 reasons that people don't want to vote? And I try to encourage people to set those things aside and say, yeah, this is a really, it's a privilege. I mean, it's our right, but it is a privilege to be able to voice that. So I would say, get to know, who's on your ballot, and vote for your candidates, because the individuals who, everybody wants to go out and vote when it's a presidential election, but the individuals who are in your community, the people that serve you, the people that represent you, those are the folks that are really going to implement change in your community. So I would just encourage everybody to get to know who the folks are on your ballot, and then go out and exercise that right.
I totally agree, because I did not start out as a Supreme Court justice. I started out as a common pleas court judge, not in Summit County, but in Franklin County. And really, you have a greater stake in voting for your local candidates, because they could someday be your Court of Appeals or your Supreme Court candidates. Or, I mean, imagine if you didn't vote in an election in Illinois years ago for a state senator named Barack Obama. And, here one day he became president, or George W. Bush, when he defeated Ann Richards for governor of Texas, and he later became President George W. Bush. You just never know. You just never know. You got to set him on the path. I totally agree with you. And I do some data searching on voting trends, and, because I do like to have the facts. I'm kind of a data junkie. I love having numbers and that those numbers to support things. But, we have about 540,000 individuals, residents in Summit County. Of those, we only have about 360 who are registered to vote. So already 200,000 people aren't voting. And then when you talk about when they're casting their ballots, in a presidential, it's maybe 70% of registered voters. That's only 50% of the population.
On a non-presidential, we're talking 17% and 15%. That's really sad. There are issues on those ballots. There are individuals on those ballots that really could speak for you. So I just encourage everybody to exercise that right.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We've been here with Judge Alison Breaux from the General Division of the Common Pleas Court in Summit County, and I'm Justice Jennifer Brunner of the Ohio Supreme Court. Thank you, Judge Breaux, for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Great talking to you.
You too. Likewise. Thank you.